All right. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everyone going? Thank you for joining us today. This is not Dave Russell and Jason Buffington. This is Anthony Spiteri here and Michael Cade. And, this is great. This is a very short notice session, but Cade and I are going to take you through some V11 goodness. So Michael, this is going to be a very, very quick session. We're going to go 30 minutes, not a lot of time. We're going to do some live demos. What do you reckon?
Yeah, we're going to try and get in as many as we possibly can, right?
Squeeze it all in. But just before we hit the live demos, let's just do a very, very quick overview of V11 in terms of what's in it, what's coming out, what are the top line features in V11. Oh, but before that, let's go with the map. Where is everybody in at the moment? Let's see, Michael, what have we got? Where are people from at the minute?
Is that your mum? I think your mum might be watching, Spiteri.
My mum? In Malta?
Australia.
No,
Australia's popped
that's
up
me.
all green, which is really quite early in the, was it early hours of the morning for you?
It is early in the morning. Yeah, it is. So anyway, it doesn't look like we've got quite a few. Not a big stretch. But anyway, we'll see how we pick that up over the next couple of minutes once we start getting into the live demos. Anyway, just to start off, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the top features of V11 as we announced them during the year, right? So, what we talked about was in Veeam. Now that felt like a long time ago, but it was actually in June, so not that long ago. We talked about 3 top line features, and the first one was talking about CDP or continuous data protection. The second was all around even more instant recovery live. Like we did a heap in V10, Michael, right? We enhanced the back end, the engine, the performance, the scalability, and it's really allowed us in this V11 version to go and hit some more, features and add instant recovery to not just VM functionality, right? And then I think finishing off the big overarching thing was enhanced object storage support. So we may or may not be showing a couple of those demos in a few minutes. Those are the top 3 features, right? And then when it came to Veeam Live, which happened only a couple of months ago now, maybe even less, we looked at a lot more. We expanded on what was coming in V11. And with the list that we've got on the next slide, we can see that we really, really took it to the next level, right? There's a ton of firepower in V11. So, we're looking at enhancements on the UI. We're looking at engine enhancements. So the things that, you guys don't really care about too much, but makes your experience with Veeam that much better, right? People do care about the UI, and we've definitely looked at enhancing that, some bits and pieces in there. The Enterprise Manager has gotten some lift and some love there for the service providers out there, VCD to VCD replication. Michael is actually going to demo a bunch of the Linux repository stuff as well, and just basically a lot of Linux love, storage integration, NAS enhancements for the automation guys out there, RESTful API, and a PowerShell module as well. So, that's only a small, tight, quick list. But, Michael, just on that, there is so much more that we haven't really even, scratched the surface of. But in terms of the demos, what do you reckon? Get into them?
Yeah, I reckon. One more. Let's see how the map looks just before you jump into
let's see what we've got in the map.
Who's where and who's coming in from where.
There we go. There we go. Now there's some more
there.
people. I thought we were just going to be talking to ourselves for the next 30 minutes and showing some demos to ourselves. So where are they from, Mark?
Big South America. So where we got Brazil there, Argentina, big Europe following there as well. Up there,
Argentina.
So my mum must be watching as well. All good. Nordic.
Sardinia. Got a bit of Sardinia going in there.
Yeah, nice.
Excellent
stuff. I think we were actually getting more green coverage than Dave and Jason.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that I'm the only one. I'm the only one in Australia, just because obviously it's 1 o'clock in Perth and 4 a.m. in the morning in Sydney, but maybe there were some people in New Zealand who are about to wake up to this as well. So anyway, with that, we're going to go through that map a couple more times. But should we start the demos? Because how long have we got now?
Yeah, we've got time. You go for it.
All right, let's do it. Okay, we're going to get through as much as possible. I'm going to start off. So let's flip to my screen. Mr. Producer, let's rock to the screen. There we go. All right, so what I am going to show you guys first is CDP, right? So I'm going to look very quickly at what CDP is all about. Now, CDP is our continuous data protection. Effectively, it's really about driving down RPOs, right? Those restore point injections. And we're doing that basically for VMware, and we're doing that with the help of what we call the VMware APIs, right? So vSphere IO APIs. This is something that VMware's been developing with us for a number of years. It's something that basically lets us dig directly into the host and intercept IOs, right? So let's take a look first and show you what that actually looks like to basically get that working. So you can see here I've got a couple of vCenters. If I click on the properties of that, you see first here we've got this manage IO filters. So if you were to actually add a vSphere host into Veeam Backup and Replication to start with, the process is pretty much the same. But now after the credentials, what we actually have is an additional pop-up that comes on and talks about the IO filters. So let's wait for this to pop through and actually get that up. Come on, come on. This might not actually do it because I've actually pre-configured this. So this might actually just go through once it finishes and collects all the disks and collects all the information. It'll basically go through and say, yep, I'm happy with this particular thing. Yeah, there we go. It's successfully finished. So let's go through that and do this a new way. That behavior has actually changed, Michael, between betas. Michael, why don't you just talk about the fact that we're on a particular beta here as well while I get this up?
I made a point. I don't know who clicked on mine when I shared out the LinkedIn post earlier. Is that so? We're using a beta version of Veeam Backup and Replication version 11. We're getting close, but we're still on a beta. But I'd still stand by that. Some of the builds that we get a little bit early access to are still they're pretty solid stuff, right? Like we can still do what we need to do, especially from a lab and demo point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, not like Cyberpunk. There's not a lot of bugs in it, right? Like for all those guys that are playing Cyberpunk out there at the moment and know about that, that's been released with a ton of bugs depending on what platform. And, you know, but this is totally software agnostic from that point of view. But just to that point, that behavior that I just did, that changed between beta 1 to beta 2, right? So in beta 1, you could actually click through that particular setting, which is why I went that way. But now we've got this more, I guess, nicer UI perspective here to basically manage the IO filters. And now what you can see when we actually do that is we have the cluster loaded. So what this is going to do, if we go through the process end to end and we add the cluster first time, this screen will pop up, right? But because we've already added this vCenter to Veeam Backup Replication, it's giving me the option to manage it separately now. So at this point, what we can do is check or uncheck that. The fact that I have this checked means that it's actually been applied and installed at the cluster level. And what this will then do is go and install the filter driver via a vib and basically deploy it to any host that then lives in this cluster, right? And doing it at the cluster level is important because if we remove a host out of the cluster or bring one in, it's going to basically automatically install it as well, right? So let's have a look and see what that actually looks like on the actual ESX server in vCenter. So we've got these couple of vCenters here, and then under the actual cluster itself, under the configure tab, we've got the IO filter option here. And you can see here we've got type VEE CDP. Now this is actually the one that lives, and it basically says now that we've got the IO filter active on all the hosts in the cluster, and it's actually active for 5 VMs. So if we click on that, we're going to see the VMs that we've actually got the filter applied to them. And I'm going to show you what that actually looks like on the Veeam Backup Replication side a little bit later. One thing to note here, though, is basically, this is installed on the cluster level and it's always going to be there and thereabouts. Now, the best way to basically do the configuration of the jobs, before I go back into Veeam Backup Replication, is basically to show you that we're leveraging tags effectively here to do the configuration of the jobs. So as you can see here, I've got a couple of tag categories or tags specifically. So I've got RPO 30 seconds and RPO 15 seconds. So what I've actually done is I've gone and on these VMs, I've applied the tags to the actual VMs itself, right? So if we can go in here, look, let's have a look and try and get the actual tag itself to come up. My resolution isn't great. Let's bring that down. Where are we? The tags. Actually, I applied it at the cluster level. There we go. So you can see at the actual VApp level itself, I've applied this tag, which means that it's applied down to all the VMs that live in this particular VApp here. So now what we do is we go back into Veeam Backup and Replication. And if I click on the actual jobs itself, you can see I've got this policy set up, which is basically a 30-second RPO policy. Now, in terms of CDP, we are calling these policies, not jobs. So that's a big differentiator here. Policy defined, backup is where we were looking to go with this particular feature itself. So let's quickly edit this and go through what it looks like. Not too much difference here in terms of a typical replication job. This is the area here I've added the tag. So if you look at here, we can obviously go via hosts, we can go via folders, we can go via data stores, or we can go via tags as well. So you can see here, if we drop down, we've got the replication, which is the tag category, and then we've actually got the tags itself. So a really smart way to be doing it. And like Michael and I have been saying for years, you really want to start to configure backup jobs with tags. All right, once we've selected the actual VMs that we want to actually tag through with this policy, we then go and select the destination. This is obviously that we've had the source. Now we're going to do the target. So we're going in the hosts and clusters. You can see here that we can target a specific host. We can target a cluster if we want. We can select the resource pool, the folder, or the data store. Okay. If we go in here into job settings, this is where we're going to source and select the source and target proxies. Now, the source and target proxies are very important when it comes to CDP in terms of what they're doing. Just as a side note here, we've done some really great deep dives into this particular feature, particularly at Tech Field Day. I think it was, 20, Michael, that we did last year. So if you want to see some deep dive advanced videos on CDP, just look up Tech Field Day 20. We might actually put some notes to that in the actual LinkedIn chat a bit later on. One of the cool things we've actually added is the ability here to do a test, okay, and to see exactly what infrastructure we have set up for the CDP versus what we've actually selected in terms of VMs. And what this will do, it'll give us some guidance to say whether we've right-sized our particular infrastructure correctly. Okay, now let's give this a bit of time to do a bit of the checking and a bit of the algorithm that goes into play. Hopefully this works, Michael. We love doing live demos, don't we? There we go. So basically what it's saying here, it's saying the source proxy CPUs, it's giving us basically the bandwidth that we have possible to use to manage the actual CDP replication workload. At the moment, it's showing that these VMs have got 0 kilobytes required because they're actually not doing a lot, right? Now, if these VMs were doing a lot of I/O, that would then basically trigger this to show what sort of resource we did need to actually facilitate a successful CDP policy and keep that within SLA. So I'm not going to go all the way through that. I think the last thing that we want to show you here is basically the fact that this job is running. We've got these replicas going into play here. If I open up this actual option here in the box, we're going to see a couple of different things. We're going to see some information about that the disks are processing. That means that we are replicating. Obviously, there hasn't been too much going on. Like I mentioned, these aren't very busy machines here at the minute. We could pump some data through and we'd start to get some replication going across. And obviously, we've got this SLA monitor here as well. So everything here is in place to give you a really good overview of what's actually happened, the amount of sessions, the amount of replica points that we've got going on as well. I don't want to dig too much more into that because I want to get into the next demos. But again, just as a reminder, to see a deep dive of CDP, please check that Tech Field Day video because it has actually got some great deep dive information around CDP. All right, Michael, let's go 2 for 3 for me. We're trying to do 3 demos each in this time frame, so that's probably why we're talking a bit quick and also why we want to try and rush through these. So the next one that I wanted to show was basically for our Veeam cloud and service providers out there. And that's vCloud Director to vCloud Director replication. Okay, this is something that we've been wanting to get into the product for a long time. Finally, it's here. Now, the thing about showing this off is that for people that are sort of used to Veeam, it's no different really to our existing replication jobs. Okay, so here we can see that we've got the replication job here. You can choose virtual machine, and instead of vSphere, we now have basically a replication job of vCloud Director. So if we go in here, obviously we give it a name. Let's choose network mapping here. Also, a little bit of a thing here, high priority, Michael, just to sort of highlight another v11 feature that we can basically mark jobs, replications, or backup jobs as high priority, and it'll basically bump them up the list a little bit in terms of, when they get processed and the algorithms that we use for that processing. Going on here, what we then do with vCloud Director to vCloud Director replication is we want to basically add the vApp. Now we can do this by basically going, drilling down, and we can add the whole organization, or we can actually select individual VApps. So what we'll do here is we'll select the whole organization. And again, just for those out there maybe wondering what this is all about, what the relevance is to them if they're not a service provider, we see a lot of people basically, moving workloads into service provider clouds. This just gives those partners that you might choose the ability to replicate your workloads across. So the story here is great for you guys, not just the service providers, but if you're looking to consume a remote infrastructure as a service VM or a bunch of workloads sitting in a cloud, if they leverage a service, you can get additional replication, okay? So now let's go in here and select the destination. So you're seeing a bit of a trend here. We looked at CDP, source destination, the same sort of thing here, but now what we're doing is we're choosing a target vCloud Director organization. It can actually be the same one. If you look at here, we're actually using the same, but you could have multiple VCD instances here. You could choose that. So let's select this particular organization here. And effectively now what we're doing is we're able to then choose a storage policy if we have different storage policies and go from there. We're able to remap networks on the fly if we had that ability here. So we can basically see what networks are attached to particular organizations. And then basically, select those particular networks on the source and the target if we want to do some remapping. So that just means that we're going to be consistent with the network at the both ends. Now, obviously, that's pretty much it. From there, it basically does replication. It works like that. A note just on this, it's not CDP to start with. That'll be hopefully coming in future versions. This is traditional snapshot-based replication. But, I guess it's really important to kind of say that this is very, very good for service providers who are looking to basically offer another level of differentiation for their customers. Right. Michael, how are we going for time? Still good for one more demo from me?
Yeah, squeeze another one in, mate.
Right, let's squeeze one more in. And this one is all about object storage, right? It's all about leveraging, object storage. We've basically been talking about this for a couple of versions now. We introduced this in 9.5 update 4. If we have a look at our backup repositories, you can see here that I've got a couple configured for Amazon S3 and Amazon Glacier. Before I talk about how we're leveraging Amazon Glacier and what we call the archive tier, what I want to do is show you that we're obviously adding an additional object storage repo for the capacity tier, and that is of type Google Cloud Storage. So something that our customers and partners have asked for, and was one of the things that Michael and I got asked for quite a bit when we used to go to those things called industry events on the floor show. They used to say, why haven't you got GCP support? We have it now. So V11 has that GCP support to add to the ones that you see there. Now, talking about the archive tier. So very quickly, with the Scarlet Backup repository, if I go to the Scarlet Backup repository here, this is basically our software-defined repository where we have a number of different extents. Now, traditionally, it was just one extent, okay? And it just literally took different types of storage, put them together, and a top-level namespace, and that was it. What we added in 9.5 update 4 was the ability to basically take that and expand that out to a capacity tier. That capacity tier was backed by an object storage repository, like you just saw. So if we click here on the properties of this particular Scarlet Backup repository, you can now see that we've effectively got 3. We've got a performance tier, which is basically that local landing zone. We've now got the capacity tier, which now we talk about as a short-term retention or a shorter-term retention, okay, where we do a copy mode or a move mode. And again, we've done some deep dives. The best editions of these are at the Cloud Field Days and the Tech Field Days. And again, we'll link to those in the chat. But now what we've done is we're actually going to extend that to the archive tier. And the archive tier is somewhere where you want to place backups for super, super long-term storage, almost like put it up there and never think about it again. And this is obviously leveraging things like, Amazon Glacier and Azure Deep Archive as well, right? So we're really leveraging those very deep and cheap storage systems that are offered by the public clouds at the moment, covering by AWS and Azure. The one thing I wanted to show just before we go to the demo, obviously I've configured all this previously. You can see that we're, archiving GFS backups older than 2 days here. But what does it actually look like when we've got these backup jobs sitting there? And how does it work when we're going to pull them back? So you can see here now under backups, we've actually got 3 or 4 different types here now: the cloud, the disk. Object storage is basically that capacity tier, and then we've got the archive tier here. So you can see that I've offloaded a bunch of older backups to the archive tier here. So if we want to go and actually do a recovery, you can see that we've got a bunch of options, and these are all the general options that you still know with Veeam. If I go instant VM recovery here, and I want to basically go to this machine, do an instant VM recovery. Now, quite interestingly, and Michael and I actually picked this up earlier in the day when we were preparing for this, you can't actually do an instant VM recovery directly off a Amazon Glacier or Deep Archive, right? It just doesn't work. The time to first byte, the way that we're storing the data, doesn't lend itself to an instant VM recovery. So when we go to basically choose a point here, and say we want to expand this out, we see that we've got a bunch on the performance tier, the capacity tier, but hey, we've got one on the archive tier. So let's select that one and see what we get. Okay, let's go and click on next, and it should come up with, okay, here we go. Archive tier data must be retrieved from the capacity tier, right? So restoration can actually be performed. What it's doing here, it's going to effectively stage the data. It's going to pull it and drag it out of the archive tier, out of that long-term storage, and stage it into capacity tier, right? So it's going to promote it into that S3. It's going to do this in 3 different ways, depending on what you want. And we're giving our customers the options, depending on whether they want it quickly, whether they want it in bulk or standard. Now, every option is going to vary in terms of the time, but also more crucially going to vary in terms of cost. Okay, so this is really important here. We've really thought about this, but again, in a very, very quick way, this is going to be a great feature for us, extending the SOBA to the archive tier, adding an additional policy element in there. It's going to be a great thing. So with that, that was 3 very, very quick demos. We're now going to basically hand over to Michael, but first, I think
I've got a quick question as well.
Oh, yes, questions.
So Sonny has asked do we have any specific calculator for required bandwidth to achieve CDP?
So the specific calculator that you saw there, that's basically what we've got. It'll give you a guide. We haven't got a specific official one just yet, but I'm sure that will actually come as we move forward with the product. And, the best thing about Veeam is our community. And I'm sure something might pop up in the community, or our great solution architects will actually bring something up as well.
Yeah, another question, and I know more than one person asked this around the release date for V11. I think without getting it, we have to make sure that this is ready. We've got lots of customers. We have to make sure that it's going to look after your data, right? So to put it into perspective, we've had beta 1, we're now at beta 2. We generally have RTM, RC, or RC, then RTM, then GA. So expect a similar time frame to V10, but I'm not going to put a date on it or anything. No. So expect similar to last year on that.
Hey, Michael, I reckon you power ahead, and I reckon we might be okay going a couple of minutes over, right? Give you a little bit more time.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to try and get. Let's quickly just go and look at the map, because I've just seen that Africa has gone completely green near enough.
Whoa.
So I've seen Kenya come through, South Africa, then lots of North Africa countries coming up there as well. I don't know
lots
if you've got any of the list there, but yeah, it's starting to be painted really green today, which is good. Challenge for Dave and Jace next week.
Yeah, wow.
So let's kick off so Anthony touched on Linux being a key focus for us from a platform point of view. We started that journey in V10, and we're continuing that as we go on. And the first one to mention, which is probably the biggest, is around this hardened Linux repository. You've probably heard Anthony talk about immutability from an S3 point of view, Amazon S3 or S3 compatible storage, about making that capacity tier immutable. But what about primary backup storage? Let's make that immutable. So in here, I've got my hardened Linux repository. And last year, what you're going to see here is that it's very much the same, and it's bring your own Linux repository, bring your direct attached storage, bring your server with you, right? So if we go down to repository here, what you're going to see is that XFS, which is the block cloning technology that we introduced in V10. So that's going to really reduce the amount of data or the amount of backup space consumed by synthetic full backups. But then what you're also going to see here is this make recent backups immutable for 7 days. Now that means and I'm no Linux guy, and I managed to set this up, and we're really simplifying how we're going to use native Linux commands to be and file system commands to be able to make sure that your data is secure from not only ransomware and all of the cybersecurity threats that we see, but also malicious insider threats, right? So just, for example, coming in here, going to our disk, hopefully it doesn't work, but if we go and find out what's on our hardened Linux repository and we go and let's go and delete that, we really are like, so hands off here, no smoke and mirrors, definitely is live, is that this is going to run through and it's going to try and delete them. But because it's not outside of that backup window or the immutable window, it's not going to be able to delete any of those. So it's going to try, but it's not actually going to affect anything. And this is a massive thing, right? Look, there's no appliance here. It's bring your own Linux backup repository with some disk in, and we can make that immutable. There's no appliance that you have to go and roll. And I know that there's been talk within Anton's digest over the last couple of days, weeks, around Ubuntu being the one that we're focusing on from a QA, but looking at other distributions as well. So you can see there, we haven't deleted anything. The backups are all still in place. That protects us. We can't go and modify that. Again, there's more demos to come around that later on. Another thing to mention would be when we're adding the Linux hosts. Now, whether these be Linux proxy, which I'll talk about shortly, but even just that Linux repository server, when we come to add, we have to supply some credentials, but not always root and not always God mode. It's probably not the best practice, and I'm sure most of you will agree that. So what we've also introduced into V11 is the single-use credentials for the hardened repository. So, okay, you might supply root for that first initial add the managed service, put all the required components on, but then we're not going to remember that. We never need that again to be able to put that, to be able to do anything to that repository. So one time, single sign-on users. We've also done some stuff around file level recovery. So whereas before for Linux file level recovery, we'd require an FLR appliance, and we would go out and we'd deploy that into your vSphere, or in fact, all of our virtualization areas now, including Nutanix AHV and Hyper-V. But we'd always have to deploy that appliance. Because we've gone all in on these other Linux managed servers, we don't need that anymore. So we're very much, you can choose one of those managed servers to act as your FLR appliance. That the old one hasn't gone away, so if you still wish to do it that way, then that's not going away. And probably another big one to really just quickly touch on is the amount of effort that R&D and product management have gone into from a Linux proxy point of view. So in version 10, this was only available to virtual appliance. So it would be a Linux box that lives within your vSphere environment, and that's the only transport mode that is available for us. And these transport modes alone, just the big call out here would be just go and make sure that you're using the right transport mode, because they all vary in what they could do for your backup windows and all of that good stuff. But as you can see, this now brings Linux proxy into being a first-class citizen, right? Direct storage access to be able to go in and back up from storage snapshots, be able to directly connect to iSCSI LUNs or fiber channel LUNs if you've got a physical Linux proxy now. All of that, the same architecture that we see from a Windows proxy point of view is there for Linux now.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, massive. Finally, and I think I've actually managed to get a few more. I think this is like 6 demos in one. If I go down to our storage infrastructure, so traditionally we've always integrated with storage vendors when it comes to VMware backups, right? And you've seen that list grow over the last 5 years exponentially, like 3-5 a year type thing. But it's always been VMware, and we've always had the ability to back up from storage snapshot, orchestrate the snapshots, on-demand sandbox from storage snapshots, all of the Veeam Explorers, that good stuff. But actually, where we were missing that integration was around NAS backup, which again you saw in V10. So we're enhancing what we're doing there. Also, agent backups. So think about those physical database servers that have an iSCSI or a fiber channel LUN presented to. We can now use our storage integrations to be able to take those agent storage aware snapshots and backup from those snapshots, rather than just taking it in the traditional sense. We're just going to see it as a disk and we're going to pull it all out. I think there's loads more to demo, so much, but I think that's probably a good full stop on the demos. How's the map looking, Anthony?
Yeah, let's get back to the map, because I think we're gonna call out where everyone is. So you ready for this list? This is crazy. So, all right, here we go. And it's countries and US states, because that's how it rolls. Germany, Arkansas, Jamaica, UK, Czech Republic, Vietnam, Belgium, Norway, Missouri, Mexico, Tunisia, New Zealand, Netherlands, France, Croatia, Washington State, Cameroon, Bangladesh, India, Algeria, Argentina. I think everything here. This reads like a COVID list. Ireland, Italy, Brazil, Austria, Panama, Egypt, Wisconsin, halfway through. France, Morocco, Phoenix, Arizona, UAE, South Africa, Iran, Canada, Romania, Dubai, Denmark, Miami, calling out Miami, Kenya, Abu Dhabi, Spain, Turkey, Costa Rica, and Mozambique. I don't think I've ever said that many countries in my life.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Right. Well, so was there any questions in there? I mean, I think we've gone too fast, really, to get any questions.
Yeah, I think the one thing, if we just we got to finish with a couple of shout outs, but just finally, I think if we just finish on the slide that has the V11 session from Veeam Live that we did, there's a link there. If you go to veeamlive.com or scan the QR code, Michael and I again presented. We took a bit more time, not that much more time, but we basically went through all the base. We didn't demo. We went through and explained a lot of those features, a lot of the lists, and basically, went through them. So if you want to get a bit more deeper dive, do that. But it's not too far away. Hopefully, early next year we will see the RTM followed by the GA. So we're really excited here at Veeam, and you guys should be excited too. It is a massive release. Michael, do you just want to call out what's coming up on the live sessions over the next week or so?
Yeah, I need the slide to show, but so I think on Thursday it's us, so I have to remember that one. We're going to look at a recap of the year and technology and how things have changed and all of the air miles
that we Strategy Live.
We haven't grabbed, so that'll be another good session. Then on Friday, the community session with Rick and Ksenia, they'll be talking about the new Veeam Legends. So you have our Veeam Vanguards that are our community focused evangelists, our advocates, and then we have our Veeam Legends, which is just a wider community where we can share content and all that good stuff in there as well. And then I think Monday
next week.
I think is that back to Jason.
Yeah,
and
Dave back to the usual ones.
Try and fill that map up with green stuff, right?
I think they're doing something I think they're doing some sort of retrospective on COVID and how that's changed the IT landscape or something like that. So David and Jeff will be back next Monday. But yeah, looking forward to our Product Strategy Live on Thursday. Please join us for that one. It's sure to be fun and exciting. It's a little bit more relaxed, a bit more casual. But with that, I think thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we gave you a little bit of an overview, gave you a bit of a taste of V11. And yeah, thanks for joining in.